Welcome to Messy Liberation,
This is our special Everything is Political series.
where we're going to help you draw the connections between your everyday life and the world around you.
Let's get started. Hello. We're joined today by a special guest as part of our Everything is Political series, Danielle Marshall, going to join us to talk about having really challenging conversations with people who may not agree with you. So, Danielle, can you tell people who you are, what you do?
Absolutely. So, first off, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be able to dive into this conversation. So, Danielle Marshall, I am an equity strategist and executive coach. And a lot of the work that I'm doing today revolves around nonprofit organizations, some small businesses. But definitely when we're talking about coaching, I am leaning heavily into this space that many of us seem to have a disconnect around right now. And that is being able to have civil conversations with people. And not just for the sake of like being kind or respectful in that, but so that we can get to some end goal as part of this conversation.
And the reason, so I talked to Taina because I had seen your video, your solo episode where you're like, oh, I don't know about doing solo episodes. You should do more because it was great. And talking about having some challenging conversations. And my question to you that I had sent you was like, okay, and then how do you deal with people whose the difficulty is that they are challenging your very humanity? Like, I don't have to have conversations with them, do I? But it also just made me realize how much I have built myself a wonderful echo chamber that I
Mm.
love because the echoes are all very beautiful. I love what I don't have to hear horrible thoughts from horrible people. And I know that can also be a problem. So since we're going to be talking about everything is political, we're talking
Mhm.
about like everything down to your garbage and the clothes you're selecting. Like literally everything is a political act. And when we start to see the world in that way, it also means you start to think about things in a new way and have conversations with people in a new way. And it can be easy to get into arguments. It can be easy to shut down or shut people out. And I don't know if I have a real question here other than like, I guess I'm just admitting that I have a challenge sometimes in having those difficult conversations. I like my echo chamber. So maybe start off by just telling me what's wrong with my echo chamber.
Well, maybe we won't look at it in terms of what's wrong, but it can be limiting. I'll say that. When I consider the various echo chambers that many of us live in, it's everything from what we watch on TV to the regions that we live in to who we socialize with outside of, work hours. Pick work outside of work hours because oftentimes work settings bring in a multitude of different types of people and perspectives. But what ends up happening is you only see the world for the most part through a particular lens. And that is what is shaped in that community that you've started to establish. And I think I'll say this for myself, like I remember having a very distinct conversation with a family member where I live in Maryland. This individual lives in Maryland as well. And we were talking about sort of the state of politics and sort of the mood of the nation. And they kept just saying, but everybody wants this particular thing. Now, I also travel for work, and I'm pretty sure, and I had to express this that when I leave the state of Maryland, which it has been primarily blue, though one might argue is turning a little bit more to the purple side now. The conversations that I might have when I am in Texas versus California versus Atlanta, like
Very
they're
different.
sound drastically different. And so I think to your point, Becky, around like what happens when we're in these echo chambers is you start to believe one set of, information that's given to you, one data point, if you will, because that's what people are talking about surrounding you. And so what's been really useful for me is as I'm traveling the country or even if I'm home, like we have access to the internet, you literally can talk to people wherever they are across the world. I love to be able to hear their perspectives on what's going on. So whether it is politics, family raising, norms, values, tell me what that means in your community. Because now you have like this vast data set that you would not have had you just stayed within that ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the mistake, and I have certainly been guilty of this and definitely foresee myself being guilty of this in the future as well. But I think sometimes the mistake that we make is like when it comes to knowing and engaging with people of differing perspectives, we mistake or we conflate engagement with community, right? Like our brain or our hearts or something just automatically assumes like if I'm engaging with this person, then that means I have to like bring all of myself, right? And I have to bring all of them into like my space and into my well-being and into the way that I choose to live my life, right? And I think that's why some people are so drawn to like just sticking with like what they know, or might be so drawn into just sticking with what they know and just like being comfortable in that echo chamber because there's a sense of like safety and community that happens there, right? Which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but like to your point, Danielle, but just like completely cutting yourself off from differing perspectives, right? Whether it's at work or at the grocery store or at a PTA meeting or, at the gym, right? Wherever you might go where you have like opportunities to engage with people that are outside of like your direct community, there's a loss that happens, not necessarily because someone else's perspective might be a better perspective than yours, or you know what I mean? But I think you lose something when you are unable to see like the humanity in somebody else. And I
100%.
think that what happens with that echo chamber is that like now all of a sudden people are defined by these like really black and white lines. And there's no room for that gray area to discuss or to see how, okay, like that person's politics or their perspective might be different from mine. And it might be harmful. It might very well be harmful and oppressive. However, that is still a human being who came to that conclusion, right? In one way or another. They weren't just like born with that political belief system or those values, right? Like something, they were raised that way. They have experiences that contributed to the way that they see the world. And it doesn't make room for people to change. It doesn't make room for people to change their minds.
Yes. Ooh, I have a lot to say on that one. To that point, though, that you made around, like, I absolutely think it's a safety mechanism it's a coping strategy. When we are unsure and when we're uncomfortable, we tend to, basically hide, and we can hide within communities that we belong to, i.e., our echo chamber. But I kind of whittle it down to this idea of what is your goal?
Hmm.
So if I'm going to engage you in a conversation, the goal might be anything from like, I want to have a good relationship with this person. Like maybe it's somebody I already know or I'm wanting to build a relationship with. It could be that I'm seeking out additional knowledge. It could be that I want to challenge myself, right? There's a whole host of things that I might come to with a goal. But in having that goal, it also tells me so much about like, is this someone that I'm willing to sit in this discussion with? Am I prepared to talk to them? But also it opens my mind up. Like I am a lifelong learner. And so if I'm going to be a lifelong learner, then I cannot necessarily say that I'm not willing to engage with new content.
Mm.
So that content also being people and perspectives. But Taina, you said something a moment ago about people having the ability to change their minds. And I've been thinking over the last couple of weeks about Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Listen, I
Now,
lived in Atlanta for like 21 years, so I have very strong feelings about
all right, well,
Marjorie
yeah, let's
Taylor
talk
Greene.
about it. But here's the thing that I'm going to say. I am not a supporter of hers
Mhm.
per se. Okay, so I'll just put that out there on the table. However, there is something that I have to say I respect in this moment that she did. When she made the decision to step away from her congressional seat, when she came out and she said, these are decisions around healthcare I don't agree with, whether it is releasing the files, all of these things.
Mhm.
Basically, what she said is, I have changed my mind. I have changed my position on this. And where I find this rather amusing, it's almost like a case study to watch in real
Yeah.
time. There are people in her party who are like, traitor. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said this. You are no longer loyal to our party. But on the flip side, we have people that are, maybe more liberal, whether they're Democrat, independent, and they are saying, well, you know what? It's a little too late. You've already caused all this harm. Now, I have to dissect this a little bit more. And so as I think about it, yes, she's absolutely caused harm. And I think people need to be held accountable to the harm that they cause. However, I also don't want to live in a world where we're unable to actually change our minds when we are presented with new information, when we are exposed to new people, new perspectives, etc. And so I have to respect that she was at least brave enough in this moment. And one can argue the reasons behind that, right?
Right.
I think there were some definite reasons, including the fact that her family was targeted, right, with death threats, etc. In a way, I almost don't care why you arrived at this conclusion. You did. And so now that we're there, are we creating space for her, but not just her, for anyone to change their mind about a particular vantage point that they have? And when I say anyone, like I'm going to break this down even simpler. People get married and divorced every day. If you needed to get a divorce, did you want someone saying, like, oh, you can't change your mind on that? We know that he's, or she's a horrible person, but you should stay together because you took a vow.
Yeah.
I don't want that kind of pressure, right? Down to what I eat. If I decide that I'm going to eat a healthier diet, I have changed my mind. My fridge could have been stocked with bonbons and potato chips the day before. I want to be able to walk a different path. There should be some flexibility that we allow for people to realize that there is, and I'm not even going to say better information out there. It's just a shift because I don't know that there's better. I think that we can have more complete information, if
Mm.
anything. But like, can we give that flexibility? Because I think about myself as both an employer, a former employee, as a mother. These are all situations, even as a community member, in which I hope the people surrounding me continue to grow, including myself.
Yeah.
And the only way we get to grow is when we acknowledge, hey, there's this new piece of information I didn't have yesterday. It's now informing my worldview differently.
Yeah.
I find this so challenging. So it's good. Challenging is good. The Marjorie Taylor Greene example specifically is deeply challenging for me because I think part of it is like to me, there is also some amount of trust that needs to be a part of that equation and like that harm and accountability piece because she's taking no accountability for her part in creating the problems that she's now saying are problems because they're affecting her.
Mhm.
Right? This classic sort of white woman situation. And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. And it's hard for me to have any amount of trust that the change is real because I don't feel like there is any accountability or any real efforting to make that feel like anything more than opportunistic and or a reaction, like reactionary versus real change. And I hear what you're saying that I do want to have freedom myself to change. I've been divorced. I've changed. I have learned and grown, and that has changed. Like, who I am today is not who I was remotely 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I want that spaciousness for that. And things like my divorce, I don't know, in this, I don't think I caused the kind of harm other than in a one-to-one relationship, right? Where there needs to be accountability and those things there, than someone like, and so maybe it's the example of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but it's also good because I need to hold
Yeah,
that.
no, I definitely appreciate that. But even as you say, like how she's showing up, can I trust it? I think the reality is we want people to show up in a particular way, but it's just that, what we want. People are still much the same as you. Like you're going to do the things that make you feel safe, make you feel comfortable, that challenge you, but you get to decide that. She also gets to decide that. I don't have to agree with it. And I absolutely would hold her accountable for any future action she takes. But I'm also looking at the other side of this, what she enabled in her community, whether I agree with this or not, is other people to question in this moment, do I in fact believe this party line?
Hmm.
Do I see a different way forward? And so for me, when I'm thinking about change on a global level, I need people to have examples, whether again, I love these examples or not, but there is another way forward.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think we get locked so much in the binary. It's either
Yeah.
this or it's that, that I'm like, we lose so much of that in between space where several other decisions could have been made. But because we can only see literally black and white in this instance, we get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it also goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago about like, well, to acknowledge that in the case of, in the case study of Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Like to continue just using that as an example, if we acknowledge that she's able to change, then that's an automatic approval of her,
Mm,
right? An automatic approval of her behavior, her past behavior, any future behavior. That's like an automatic admission of trust, right? On our behalf of someone like her. And again, it's that black and white thinking, right? It's either that it has to be all or nothing. And that's never really the case, but I think it's a symptom of the type of society that we live in, right? Where like we live in a incredibly toxic capitalist society where it is all or nothing almost all of the time. Like you give your all to your job or you get fired. You give your all to relationships or they end, right? Like you give your all to your children or you're a bad parent, right? And so there hasn't been enough models that a lot of people have been exposed to about how to exist in those gray areas to make room for that flexibility, to make room for that kind of dynamic type of growth that can sometimes look like one step forward, two steps back, right? Because if you put that on a chart, on a spreadsheet, that looks like failure to a lot of people, right? Because of the way that we've been taught to perceive the world around us.
I wonder though about your statement. There haven't been enough models. And so I almost will come back and challenge that because I wonder, I don't have data on this, but I wonder if it is a matter of not having a quantity, a certain number of people
Mm,
who have modeled this. Or, in this case, have we had these models all along, but we've done what is basically happening now, where it's like we silence these people because we don't trust them, because we want to hold them accountable, because we want to penalize them. And so if we silence people in those moments, the models may have existed. We just don't value them. And
yeah.
so I don't have a data set around that, but it does lead to other questions for me as like I'm really examining the landscape. And as people, are we willing to entertain this? So I happen to be someone who is willing to see where the nuances exist. Sometimes I'm trying to think about the greater good in the midst of a conversation and still can deeply disagree with the thing that was said or the individual. And I can hold two things as true.
Mm,
So I kind of, where does
yeah.
that leave us?
Yeah.
Part of what you talked about too is like, because you were talking about change, Taina, and you were like, yes, Danielle, like we need to have spaciousness for people to be able to change. And like, I guess I feel the tension around, yes, I want people to change, especially if it's towards being more equitable and just and empathetic and all of these things, right? Like, yeah, I want to see that. And I guess the conflict I have with the whole piece around engaging in conversation with people is, and I don't think I want to take the role of educating you, right? Like, I don't know that I want that to be my job. I also don't know that I want to engage in conversations where it feels, I don't, maybe unsafe is too strong of a word, but more than just uncomfortable because it's like someone questioning my humanity
It can be
because I'm
triggering.
queer. Right. Yeah. Right. And feel really that can cause me some amount of trauma even, right? And so like that's I guess the challenge is, how do I both want people to be able to change and give them that spaciousness and honor myself inside of that to say it doesn't have to be me that helps them change necessarily, or does it and me copping out, that's like a cop out. I don't know, I'm curious what you think.
I mean, I don't think there's one right answer to this. I mean, there are literally trillions of people walking the face of this earth. You don't have to talk to all of them. Like who is in your sphere of influence? That's the way that I tend to look at this because I do think that there's a level of discernment that's needed when you think about engaging in a conversation. I would never ask someone who is literally going to be re-traumatized or traumatized for the first time to engage in a particular conversation just because I think it's a good strategy. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't advise that for me. I wouldn't advise it for you. But in terms of discernment, like, I think there are things that we can sort of look at. Like, is this person willing to engage in a respectful conversation where you can say, we're going to get both of our viewpoints on the table? Right?
Mhm.
What is, again, the goal of this conversation? If it's just that I want to share perspectives, I think a lot of times when we run into this, I don't want to talk to this person, it's because both of us are coming at it from this perspective of my job is to convince you. I tell people all the time, jokingly, but not jokingly, convincing you is not my particular ministry. I am here to walk alongside with people that want to engage in the conversation. If you want to go there, I am absolutely willing to go there with you. We can share more personal details, we can share perspectives, how we arrived at things, but my job is not to convince you. If you are convinced that the sky is red, then by all means, please allow the sky to be red. That's not for me. Somebody else out there absolutely is going to go there with you. There are different personality types. And so I say, find your niche of where you can either guide people, be in conversation. Where do you have influence?
Yeah, I think that's a good framework because I think I was thinking the same thing, Becky. It's like, where do you draw the line between being open to engaging with people, right? With differing perspectives and having some of these like difficult conversations that can be uncomfortable, but then without like triggering yourself, right? Because so much of the world does feel unsafe these days, right? Whether it's social media, TV, relationships, work, just climate change. There are so many things that do feel unsafe that it's incredibly difficult to keep your nervous system regulated enough
Absolutely.
to have these types of conversations with people sometimes. So like where is the line? But I like what you said, Danielle, about like one, your sphere of influence, but also considering like how traumatizing is this going to be? I'm probably not going to choose to engage to sit down in a conversation with a neo-Nazi, right? But that might be somebody else's ministry, right? For lack of a better term, to use the language that you use, Danielle. But I might sit down with a family member who might have differing political views, who I know will
Hmm.
respectfully engage with me, right? And the moment that they choose to be disrespectful, like then at that point I have the option to be like, okay, this conversation is no longer productive and it's time for me to remove
100%.
myself from this situation. And I think we forget that we have that type of agency also in these conversations.
So, but what I hear you also talking about is something I advocate for a lot, and it's sort of like the pre-gaming of the conversation.
Hmm.
There's some conversations like that are just going to happen. I'm at the grocery store, someone starts talking to me while I'm online. Like I do not know that this conversation is going to come up, but even real time, I can still check in with myself. Like, am I open to having this? And if I'm not, I will politely turn around and just not engage in the conversation. Like there's no reason you have to do something. But if we were going to, Thanksgiving just passed, we have other holidays coming up. If we're sitting together at a family table, if you know that you have a family member who's notoriously difficult, and it doesn't even matter whether it is politics or anything else, when you're going to have that next baby, right? They're going to bring up something and you're like, ugh, cringe.
Yeah.
You get to pre-game plan this in a way because it is thinking about, again, I'm checking in with myself, I'm grounding myself. Are there somatic body practices I can use real time when I feel myself getting tense? I keep, and I'm reaching over on my desk. I have this little stone that my daughter painted me some years ago. It's got a little panda on it. But what I love about this is I can keep it on my desk, and when I am stressed, and I am often in stressful conversations, I just rub it. The sensory act of like feeling the ridges and the bumps in it is enough to keep me present and grounded. And it
Hmm.
is a reminder, stay in your body. Stay in your body. But along those lines of also sort of pre gaming, it's like, are you setting up boundaries? Because when we're getting together with a group of people, whether it is at work or family gathering, again, here are the topics I'm willing to engage in. And if this topic comes up, I'm going to excuse myself. You have every right to say this is a no go.
I would like to go into a little of the like how to have the conversations that are challenging because I think we have been in a social media landscape for so long that many of us have lost the ability to have conversation with nuance and depth and two people actually engaging in discourse versus like angrily typing and hitting
That's
send
very
and angrily
reactionary.
yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So I'm as guilty as anybody of that because, that landscape is a landscape where I'm like, I don't want to engage because I know what engagement ends up looking like, which is just escalation of tension until finally it explodes and people walk away. And I think because it's been like that for so long that there is some amount of my own brain that is like, if I try to engage in these conversations in real life with people, is it not just going to go the same way? So I think for many of us who've been existing in like a pithy 140 character arguments and calling that discussion about big issues, what does it really look like to have conversations around challenging topics? I know being curious, I'm imagining is a big part of it, but what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind so that we can keep our nervous system regulated and also come out the other side of the conversation feeling like whether we're not convincing, but whether we came to a place where we agree at the end or not, we both walk away from it feeling like that conversation was worth having. That conversation felt good.
Yeah. So some of the things that I often talk about is like, again, being aware of your body even in this moment. Like, what am I modeling to someone else? Am I calm or am I tense? Right? Do I look like I'm reactionary and I'm about to jump down your throat? Or am I in a posture that looks like, yeah, like we can just have a normal, regular conversation? I think other things that are really important to me are using I statements.
Hmm.
So instead of, trying to push blame on someone else, but I need to share my truth. In my experience, like, I feel like this thing has happened, or I have had this particular experience. This isn't about them. Like, you can negate, if you will, you can try to negate my experience, but it's always going to be my experience. Like, this is how I saw the world. It is how I experienced it. And so I think using I statements sort of is one way to demonstrate impact that someone might be having through your lens. Other things though, and this one I think is really, really important to me right now in so many ways. Like, I do a lot of consulting with organizations, and what I want to see more of is a shifting the frame around this idea that it's you versus me, right? Or a us versus them dynamic. Instead, when we have an and I don't really care what the issue is. It could be an organizational policy that needs to be changed. It could be a family decision that needs to be made. Okay. Instead of us saying, well, I want this and you want this, and therefore it's a us versus them, how do we explore this as a shared problem or solution that we have to come up with a solution to, excuse me. And so in a case like that, when we're thinking about like, how can we together find a solution to this problem? I'm not your enemy anymore, right? I'm willing to be your collaborator, your partner in this. Getting to some level of understanding, I think is important about driving forward a solution that's going to work for everyone. But to that end, as we're having these conversations, we have to ask ourselves, like, am I really listening to understand their perspective? Or again, is it this argument I am trying to win? Even before the argument has started, like, did I come in with this, my family is anti-LGBTQ, and so therefore I'm going to put a stake in the ground and I'm going to be really loud and bold about this, or, Uncle so-and-so is a racist, or they're whatever political party, and therefore I need to be the one who's defending everyone. If you come in with that posture, I promise you, you're getting that. You're going to get it because
Yeah,
people can almost sense it.
Yeah.
for sure, because and I am so guilty. Like, I am raising my hand saying, "Yep, I know that this is how I can show up," because I feel so righteous about the way, like, but and part of it is just like I just so desperately want us all to get to that, like, yay, we've all agreed on moment and we're all in the same boat and we're all moving towards this same beautiful future that I envision, right? So there is that, but that me trying to force that on you isn't gonna that's never changed anyone's mind. And I can feel myself like all the time. I'm thinking about what I want to say instead of listening. And
Yeah.
and it can be hard because when you're listening to someone where you're like, you're so wrong, like in your head, just thinking you're so wrong, it's really hard to listen and just hold space for that.
And again, so that's the discernment that I also would ask you to think about. Am I ready for this conversation? And
Probably not.
sometimes the answer is no, I
Yeah.
am not ready. The topic might be too raw. We might be healing from a past trauma related to that. So you want to have this conversation. And I'm like, I don't even know how I feel yet other than hurt.
Hmm.
I haven't processed it enough to be able to engage in any kind of meaningful conversation because it's too raw. And so you have to make a decision for yourself about like when it feels right to enter the conversation and when you really just have to pull back and say maybe we can try this again another time. But from the perspective of like being able to ask questions where we are centering curiosity and we're trying to leave behind some judgment, something I will often ask people is what feels most important to you about this issue? Because I don't have a perspective. I simply want to know based on, what we're talking about, Becky, Taina, what is important to you about this? And so the goal is in that case is not for me to answer you. It is for me to listen.
Hmm.
Right. So that's why I say setting the goal. And Becky, I see your face right now.
No, I'm letting that wash over me because yeah, like I think a lot of what you're saying feels aspirational to me, right? Like I'm not opposed to it. It just doesn't feel like my existence at the
I,
moment. Like
mhm.
Taina, I'm also a bit of a judgy bitch because Taina is a bit of a judgy bitch, and I
Self
can be a judgy bitch.
self-proclaimed judgy person.
What about those I statements?
Well, sorry, Taina. I can be a judgy bitch. I'm only saying because Taina has previously said, but I should not have
Working
spoken
on
for you.
it, I promise.
We both can be a bit of, we can be judgy bitches and it can be hard to set that aside because I think you're right. You talked about that being like it's a coping mechanism, it's a defense mechanism. But if you're trying to have real conversation, you have to find ways to remove the defensiveness. And I know that, like, as a white woman, I have learned so much about needing to drop my own defensiveness when I'm being called in, when I'm in the learning mode, like when I fuck up and I need to take accountability, understanding the ways that defensiveness holds me back from growth. And yet I can find myself in challenging conversations with people who fundamentally disagree. Like I'm talking like on fundamental kind of issues. I can have a conversation about best flavors of ice cream with anybody and not get upset, right? Like, oh, you like mint chocolate chip? I think it's repulsive, but that's okay. Let's get along. But when we start talking about bigger issues, like real fundamental issues around humanity, I find it very, very hard for me to drop those defenses. And the need to be right, which is like, it's all the same shit. It's just in a different context. Like the same stuff I'm working on as a white woman to try and, release my active participation in white supremacy culture. Like, it's the same stuff that's showing up here when I'm like trying to meet somebody else and say, you need to be more like me. And it's like, no. Anyway, yeah.
But that can be the painful part of it because, everything that you're talking about is white supremacy culture manifesting in our world, right? It's the perfectionism. It's there's only one right way,
Mhm.
right? Like I have to be the one that's going to give the right answer. It's the paternalism. I know better than you do.
Yeah.
It's literally all of these things. And so if you are trying to actively dismantle these, you have to be able to hold room for both your own growth and development, but also this other person's and acknowledge that you may be further along on your journey than they are, right? Like you would never belittle a child for not understanding some complex, system or be able to read, like, are you reading War and Peace? And they're like, but mommy, I'm 3. You're not going to go there with them, but we do that to adults so frequently. And I think it's easier. I shouldn't even say easier. I think some of the judgment comes out, particularly when we see aspects of ourselves we are not okay with.
Mm.
So if I need to be right all the time, and I feel that deep in my soul, and I can say this because I'm working on this, but if I need to be right, then when I come across someone else who always positions themselves as I need to be right, oh man, that triggers me something terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let me tell you all the reasons you're wrong, right? Because I can't help it. And so it's acknowledging the very thing that you're trying to slam them for in that moment is something that you represent as well.
Oh,
And
but
that is
Danielle,
intense.
that's not easy. That's
Yeah.
hard shit right there.
Yeah.
That's not nearly as fun as just being a judgy bitch.
Yeah.
No, it is not fun. It is
No,
work.
but you're so right on with that exactly. And it is interesting to see the ways that I still engage in so many of these behaviors. And I can see it sometimes. Like it's almost like you can pull out of yourself and be like, what am I doing right now? Right. But it just feels really hard in those moments when you're in that tension and that in a discussion or in a moment that's like fraught with big issues. It can be really hard to drop the defenses. I guess in the same like when I think about Marjorie Taylor Greene, going back to her, that piece of I don't trust her, there is like this trust and safety are so hand in hand. And like when you don't feel a level of trust with the person that you're trying to engage with, it becomes even more difficult to drop your defenses because you feel more vulnerable. Right. And I guess that's part of what you're talking about is like, can I have this conversation?
Mhm.
Am I even equipped to be able to do that? Because there is vulnerability in having discussions in the way you're talking about having them. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's hard to be vulnerable with some people. Like if you're not internally resourced, you may not be able to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that end, though, I would say start with maybe an inner circle. Like, who are the people that might be safer to practice these skills on? So the two of you, for instance, you get along well, you have space that's a naturally occurring time to talk. this might be, even if you have different perspectives on things, you trust each other enough that you could say, hey, let me test this out. Let me ask a question seeped in curiosity in this moment. Because now you're hearing yourself, right? And sometimes when we talk, we realize things for the first time. Like I had a moment like that yesterday, and I'll share that story in a second, where I didn't realize how deeply I believed something until I heard myself say it. And I was like, oh, like I could feel it come across my body. And I was like, if I hadn't had that conversation in that moment, had I not been challenged with the question that was put in front of me, I don't know that I would have arrived there as quickly.
Mm.
And so to that end, and I will share what the question was, I had said something about me being really upset about how folks are currently trying to rewrite narratives about who individuals are. So for me as a Black woman, what that narrative about being a Black woman is, but you could fill in the blank because any identity that is not dominant culture or even dominant culture, the narratives are
Yeah.
being rewritten as
Yeah.
we speak right now. And so I was really, really just upset about this. And the person kind of challenged me and they were like, well, who's rewriting the narrative? And I could feel as soon as, and this was a safe setting. The person was lovely. And the second that she said it, I was like, well, who the hell do you think you are? Right? Like it
What
was
do you
that
mean
kind of
who?
reaction.
Everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, them, they did it. I could feel that coming up. And then I was like, Danielle, pause for a second. Because one, in understanding, and so this does matter about trust. I had just met her, but because of the environment we were in, it created more of a trusting type of situation. So I said, let me just roll with this and we'll talk it out. She wasn't asking to be like, are you clear about this? She was asking because she was genuinely curious. Who do you think is altering these narratives? And so we sort of explored that. But as we were talking, what was really bothering me at the heart of it is, yes, it is the narrative sort of revisions and it is the books being removed from our libraries and our schools. And it's all the things that I'm watching happen in real time, along with how we talk about people. But then I had to think a little bit deeper. And I was just talking, kind of rambling for a little bit. And I arrived at this space that I said, you know, what is bothering me about this narrative is I can't actually trace my lineage back, but to a certain point. And
Mm.
so my family is originally from the Caribbean. And I shared that with this group. But even as I was saying that, I said, I don't know where my people are from
Mm.
because they were not native to the Caribbean islands. They were native to African countries, of which they were stolen and enslaved and brought to the Caribbean and then came to the US. And so, from a narrative, what was really bothering me is that the narrative that has been told about many of my people is that you were slaves. And I'm like, no, we weren't slaves, we were enslaved. I
Mhm.
was like, and the narrative did not start with said enslavement. It
Mhm.
started when we were the architects, the, agriculturalists, the fishermen, the whatever it was, the teachers, the educators. And yet I can't connect deeply on a soul level back to those people because I will never be able to track them down. Like the history is so fragmented. And so when I think about the narratives today, I'm like, you have erased a piece of my history to begin with. You will not, under any circumstance, erase the piece that I have today
Hmm.
that connects me to who I am. And so, like, as I said that out loud, again, I could feel it radiate through my body because I was furious and I was sad. And I was like, what do I do with this vast amount of emotions that I'm experiencing with an individual I just met?
Yeah.
And so when I think about like how that weaves into conversations, knowing how raw that is, like I feel very comfortable sharing that with you right now. I'm not going to go out and share that story with someone I don't feel like I can trust in this moment because it's raw still. Like I haven't figured out how I want to process this, what I want to do with it. All I know is it doesn't sit well in my body.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
it brings up a really good point, along the same lines of what we've been talking about, we talked about pre-gaming and making sure we're emotionally ready to have some of these conversations. And I think sometimes we don't know, right, in the moment if we are emotionally ready because there's traumatic wounds, right? Traumatic instances that we haven't ourselves yet explored. But and there's so many layers on top of it that when something happens, like in the present, it's like it's pushing into those layers, right? And it's like pushing into that wound, but we haven't gotten deep enough yet to like just really explore what that means for us, which I think just is an incredibly important point to just bring about that like it's important for us as individuals to be doing our own inner work, regardless of how many of these conversations we're having. Whether you decide to stay in your echo chamber or not, like it's still important to do the emotional work on yourself, right? Because one, you never know when you're going to get triggered, right? And two, right, it creates this level of self awareness that is important for your own growth, for you to be able to change your own mind about certain things, regardless of what happens outside of yourself. And so many of us are just so used to just going day to day, one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. There's like this constant need to just be moving, to just be productive, to just be doing that it makes it difficult to feel like you can take time for yourself to do those things. But it's so important to start there, right? This takes me back to a lot of like, and we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, I think, but just like and I'm sure this comes across in your work too, as well, Danielle, right? This like concept of like emotional intelligence, right? And I think in a work setting or in a group setting, so many times we think about emotional intelligence as being about someone else, but it really starts with yourself, right? Having the emotional intelligence of who you are as a person. What triggers you? What are your values? What's important to you? What are you emotionally prepared to deal with and not deal with? How are you feeling at any given moment in order to be able to actively engage with other people in a way that's healthy and in a way that makes room not just for their humanity, but for your humanity as well?
Yeah, definitely resonates with me, and I think you're touching on a couple of things that also tell you you're not ready to be in that conversation. If you're tired or exhausted, if you are highly stressed by something not even adjacent to this, but like just stress in your life, these are not good times for us to really be able to like go into these conversations and fully be ourselves because we've used up our reserves. And so if you and you know this, like I don't know if you all have kids and things like that. I know Becky, you do, but like you know that you can be much more generous with your children when you've had a good night's rest and they come in and mommy this and I need this and there's a field trip today and I didn't pay for it yet. Please sign this paper and I'm running to the bus. Like you all of a sudden your reserves are out and like you're yelling, you're fussing, why didn't you do what you were supposed to do? Right? You've used up your energy versus you've had a chance to reset, relax a little bit, you're in a different frame of mind. Even when challenges come your way, you can think about them with a greater range of, possible solutions to it than you can when you're feeling taxed already. So I think that's a thing to notice within ourselves. Like, am I ready to step into this space? And like that discernment is both about the individual you're going to encounter, but it's also about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. I feel like I need a nap now.
No, but I mean, look, I started with a great deal of tension, not because of anything, just the mention of Marjorie Taylor Greene and like this feeling of, I think what comes up for me is if it's almost like, well, if I can't get to a place of what you're talking about and like allowing for her change and offering that grace and all of that, then like I'm failing that same sort of binary thought, right? And I'm leaving feeling more like, I just want to continue to challenge myself to look at my side of things to say, where can I allow myself to be more vulnerable? Where can I honor my own humanity by honoring their humanity? Like, and also recognizing that I'm not always going to be able to. And that doesn't mean I'm failing. It's just a part of this
Mhm.
process.
Yep.
Because I think that's what comes up for me, that same binary thought of like, either I'm the wonderful saint of a person who forgives all and like can just be with people and hear their thoughts and whatever, or like I'm failing, and that's just not the truth of it. So
Yes. But it again, I think you're speaking to like having grace for yourself. I think the questions that you've asked are wonderful. Like, how can I protect this person's humanity so that I can also protect my own, right? Like, what are the questions that you want to ask? And I would say to people who are wanting to be on this journey, but they're finding it really difficult, even if there's just one question you can practice. Just choose something and lean into that. So if you want to ask someone what's important to them about this issue, if you want to ask like what else might be true when you feel like they are going completely down this path of, well, this is the only thing that's right. Well, what else might be true? I'm just wondering. Have you heard anything else? Right? Like you can tap into it, but it is literally a practice. If we decided we wanted to lose weight, right? Going to the gym once and working out, I don't care how hard you work out, it's not going to do the trick. You don't come out 40 pounds lighter. It is a consistent, I'm here on a regular basis. I am trying new exercise equipment. So I might be running today. I might be lifting weights tomorrow. I'm doing all of the different things because over time I'm building a muscle.
Yeah.
I like that question that you have about see my brain. I've already forgotten it, but the questions you said because what else might be true? The one before that. What do you want to
What's
see?
important to you about
What's
this issue?
important to you about this? Are there other questions like that are helpful? Because I think sometimes that's part of it too. Is like I don't even I think it's hard to even know how to ask a question
Yeah.
that
So,
won't get them upset.
but well, I mean, you cannot control
Well,
what's
of
going to upset
course, but
another person, right? And so I think that's the other thing you get to excuse yourself out of right off the top. I'm not responsible for your reactions. Okay. I'm
yes,
responsible for mine.
yes, and like I totally, I'm not responsible for their, but there are ways of asking things that are going to be put somebody
Yes.
on because you meant the I statements. I'm a big fan of I statements. I
Mm,
agree with that. I like your question about what's important to you. I just wonder if there's other things that feel
Yeah.
more inviting versus like challenging.
Yeah. So, one thing I will say not to do as a general rule, and so folks that are either coaches or people that ask a lot of questions generally will stay away from why questions. Why right off the top sounds accusatory. Why is that in your background? And like, even if it's a benign thing, you're like, wait, what's going on back there? What I feel I can see myself tensing. But, you could ask someone, can you tell me more about your experience? Right. Sometimes it's a statement like, I appreciate your perspective. I want to understand more about it. Right. Or it sounds like we both deeply care about this issue, even if we see it differently. Tell me about it. Right. So, like, these are things that you can do. And one of the questions that I frequently ask people to think about, again, pre gaming, but be ready to pull out, is to simply say, can we pause this conversation and return to it when we're both ready? Because as you talk about, and Taina mentioned this earlier, agency, you can stop a conversation midway. I care so deeply about our relationship that I don't want to cause harm. Can we pause for the moment?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all really helpful. I think because again, like you said, it's muscles that people are exercising. And if those muscles have atrophied, especially in a online world of, 140 character arguments, um, it's helpful to have some language that you can pull from to sort of have ready when you're like, I'm not sure how to engage in this without it, without this
Yes.
turning into an argument. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Is there anything else about everything is political and all the discussions that we have can be political, but anything else when we told you about what this topic was and what we're exploring with the series, and why we want to talk to you, I just want to make sure, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we talk about?
Everything is, in fact, political. I don't know that I have too much more to add to that particular thing, but literally everything from our food choices to our clothing. And I'll just a segue out. You can edit this out if you'd like to, but I had to laugh the other day because I was on Facebook, which I try not to be too often anymore. But Facebook has this way of bringing up memories, right? And so I got a memory from, I don't know, 10 years prior. And it happened to be that as I'm looking at this, I'm wearing the same outfit that I was wearing in this picture. I had to laugh because I promise folks, I do have other clothes in my closet. But what was so interesting to me about it is, again, to this point you made in the very beginning, like where we notice these things. Because for me, I'm okay with people earning money, right? I actually am a fan of people having the income that they need to make choices for their families, for themselves, etc. I dislike how we use money in a capitalist way, basically like someone's always going to be the lesser of.
Mhm.
so that I can have more. And so I disagree with that. But how it has played out in my life and why I say this is still connected to politics is I very much am somebody who's thinking about sustainability on a regular basis. So while it was shocking to see myself in this outfit on Facebook and then acknowledge it is still hanging in my closet and now on my body physically, I had to think about I am not someone who believes in waste. There was nothing wrong with the outfit. Just because capitalism says you should go out and buy 10 more of this, in different colors and you need more, I'm like, I do not need more.
Mhm.
And so I think that is I've shared this story maybe with a handful of people, but I don't really talk about it because I don't think about it day to day, but it very much shapes who I am as a person. And even within this, we don't have to talk about things. You just move through life. But can you notice where your decisions connect to your politics, to the way that you see the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then have discussions about that in a way that honors that not everyone sees the world through the same filter you see the world through. And
Yeah.
And that's okay.
and it's
Yeah, and that
I don't
yeah.
want a clone of me.
yeah, yeah, and I think what you just said there, and that's okay, is really important. I wanna make sure, like, we just, like, end on that note because it's, like, sometimes with that binary thinking, with that desire to always be right, that comes with a burden to evangelize about our perspectives and about our beliefs, and it's, like, that's a fucking hard burden to carry, to try to convince everybody every single day that, like, to see things the way that you see things. Like, and one thing that I have been on my own journey of as a reforming judgy bitch is like just making sure that I release myself from that burden of like trying to convince people to always see things the way that I see things, right? Like that's not something that I need to be carrying. Like I already have enough stuff to carry. Like I don't need the extra burden of like always trying to prove to everyone that I'm right or that the way I see things is the way to see things. Even if some of the way that I see things might be the best way. Obviously, sometimes the way I see things is not the best way, right? But like, even if I
I
feel
love it.
that intrinsically, like, it's still not my responsibility to like project that onto other people.
And I love that you said that. And I'm tickled by it because if we go back to just one piece of the conversation, we have this opportunity to bring in and invite in multiple perspectives, whether or not we agree with things. I think that is really, really important because if we acknowledge that there is not a singular right way, the goal really should be to have as many solutions, perspectives, ideas on the table as possible. Because once those things are all brought forth, even if you are politically opposite to me, you may have a good idea.
Mm,
I have to be willing to acknowledge that this, in fact, is a good idea because it meets the context of this moment we're in. It isn't about your political affiliation, your race, your gender, any of these things. A solid idea to solve a challenge we collectively are having is one worth listening to.
yeah, yeah,
And that is in such direct opposition, I think, to so much of cancel culture.
yeah,
And again, there's lots of thoughts about that. We don't have to go deep into it or anything because we can wind up, but just it is challenging, I think, for a lot of us where we're existing in this world where it's like it's one strike, you're out, and we never want to hear from you again. And being able to be more open to nuance and humanity.
Then I would love to leave listeners with one last question. If you find yourself unable to see these multiple perspectives, ask yourself, how is that working for you?
I would say my echo chamber is pretty great for me, but maybe not. There are times where I see it's not. So I will at least hold on to that. That could be a problem. Some people might be like, working great. Thanks, Danielle. I'm living
Yeah,
life.
well, I mean, but here's the thing. Again, convincing you is not my ministry. I'm
yeah.
just here to offer
I
additional
love
ways
that.
to think about it. You have to decide if you want in or not.
I'm going to try really hard to remember that convincing you is not my ministry because that feels really good. Thank you so much, Danielle. We'll put information in the show notes for people on how to find you, but just if you want to tell people quickly your
Hmm.
website or and
Sure, you can
podcast
find me over at culture-principles.com, or you can find me as Danielle Marshall on LinkedIn.
and your podcast is
I did not mention my podcast. So I am the host of Unpacked Culture Chronicles, where we talk about navigating across cultural similarities and differences. And so if this has whet your appetite, please feel free to join me wherever you can find podcasts.
yeah, good show. All right. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
Taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.